Thank you all for coming today to the presentation. My name is Tom Hudson. I'm the technical director here at 1323. I'm blinded right now by a light, so sorry I can't see really anything, but I know that there's pizza and wine and beer back there, as well as water and soft drinks. If you haven't gotten that already, go ahead and grab some, and if you need to go to the bathroom at any time, the bathrooms are around the corner and back there. So today we're going to be talking, the title of the presentation is Don't Go Chasing Waterfall, and it's basically a case study on collaborative app development. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Vince from Dev9 and introduce his company. Thank you. Okay.
All right, thanks Tom. Like Tom said, my name is Vince Montalbano. I'm a solutions architect with Dev9. We focus on CI/CD, test-driven development, and everything that is encompassed in the API and services layer.
Hi, I'm Catherine Rowe. I'm the senior UX UI designer here at 1323. We're a product design studio, and we're split roughly between half designers, half developers, and we specialize in digital strategy, design, and engineering.
Hey, I'm Max Wade. I'm an iOS and Android developer at 1323. So my job is to take the designs that Catherine has made and turn them into an application that is going to go on to the end user.
So before we dive too far into the presentation here, just wanted to ask a couple questions from the audience. Anytime that you've worked in an end-to-end solution, what are some of the problems that you've encountered as you have either multiple different pieces of one organization or working across multiple different organizations?
I'll start first. At the organization I used to work at, we used Slack, but we used the free version, and we would make big project decisions, and then they would disappear after a few days. That sucked.
Yeah, having a good, steady history of your conversations and your different decision points is very important to make sure that you can reference them in the past. Yep.
Let's say figuring out how to best fit a design organization within a large engineering organization.
Absolutely. So making sure that your processes take into account what the larger organization is trying to accomplish, for sure. Anyone else?
Clients not being receptive to wireframes and just wanting to go straight to design.
Right. Understanding the importance of each step in the process, for sure.
Teams blocking each other, so you got a back-end team and a front-end team. The front-end team has to wait for the back-end team to actually implement.
Making sure you parallelize your processes, for sure. Good communication. Awesome. These are all really good points, and these are a lot of the same things that we're going to touch on in this presentation today. So there really is a hard truth that, unfortunately, you do encounter this in the real world sometimes. So there is friction between these different teams and different organizations. Sometimes it really comes down to just poor communication, not having strong organizational lines that encourage that sort of communication. It could just be a lack of overall planning, not having the proper personnel in place to support that. And you do have that problem too of making sure that your paths are as parallel as possible so that you can actually iterate and make changes without having to redo everything that you've already done. So the goal of this presentation today is really to talk about how can we make that easier? How can we take some of that pain away? And the first point that I would say about that is really kind of fluffy in some ways. It may come across that way, but it's really, really important to make sure that everyone who's involved has a shared sense of ownership in the entire end-to-end solution that they're delivering. It's not just, I've worked on my piece and now I'm going to hand it off, and I don't care what happens after this because I've done what I'm supposed to. Because that's not really how this works, and it's not a linear flow, as we all know. In addition to that, you need to make sure that you have strong paths to communication. We'll talk more about some of the tools and techniques later on. And now I'll hand it off to Catherine.
All right, so we thought the best way to talk about the process of making the app was to actually go through it. So the concept app that we've made today is called Raley Tally, and it's just a really simple ping pong score tracker. So we're going to walk you through from whiteboard all the way through implementation and then show a demo at the end. So our team, you can think of the top half as 1323. So I'm the UX UI design. Some companies have those roles split into two different teams, but here we have our designers do both. And then in the middle there, you'll see PMs for both us and for Dev9. So those are our project managers who help us keep everything on track and communicate with clients and make sure that we're prioritizing the right things.
I'm over on the user-facing app development side, so I will be making the application that will go to the final customer. So I'm kind of straddling both realms here between Catherine's designs and Vince's data models.
And underneath here on the bottom is kind of the part of the iceberg that you don't see, where the APIs and the services help to manage state, make sure that everything happens securely, and really breathe life into the awesome designs that the rest of the team has worked to put together. So going back to communication a little bit here. In today's day and age, what we've really found is most effective is using a set of tools that encourage the way that people want to interact. So tools like HipChat and Slack that allow real-time messaging, we've found to be very, very effective for that. The way that it's set up allows you to work within channels and preserves history as far back as you can see if you have the paid version. Yeah. But even with the free version, you can get a much better organizational communication model than, let's say, email. If you joined the team later on, you're not going to have any of that unless someone remembers to forward you every single email. But HipChat and Slack make it much easier for you to have all of that context right in line. You can also integrate a variety of different tools so you have a single pane of glass for you to be able to communicate effectively. That could be getting build notifications, pull requests from your code repositories, updates that a particular task is ready for your review, anything like that. It also allows you to operate much more effectively in your overall feedback cycle. So the time that it takes to get one message to another person and then respond is much shorter when you have the right tool set. Task management is the other half of this coin. Things like Trello, Asana, Jira, Basecamp, they all help to serve that purpose, to make sure that you can move things from ready to doing to done, and any of the other intermediary steps that you might have in your particular workflow. Anyone use these tools or other tools? Have any sort of feedback experience? Yep. Jira. Yep. Jira's pretty common. Absolutely.
And Slack.
And Slack. Yes.
The free version.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, these are just a sampling of some of the tools. There's definitely others out there, but we've found in particular that these work well for our organizations.
All right, so once communication is in place, we like to start off with whiteboarding. So it's a really quick and informal way to get our designers and developers collaborating right from the very start. And it's a quick way to kind of get high-level UX and desired behaviors mapped out.
So as a developer, one of my favorite aspects about whiteboarding is just the extremely low overhead that comes with making changes to this design. It's not like Photoshop where you need to be well-versed in this technical language to make anything. So for example, if one of our team members had some feedback to Catherine about a design, we can change it like that. You know, it's not a huge pain to go back and do these things. And so that kind of affords an iterative design process where you're always making changes, going back and refining things as the project matures and you find out more about your client's needs here. Not only that, but since the whiteboard is huge, it takes up like a whole wall of our back meeting room. It kind of engenders a shared sense of ownership across the entire team for the project. It's not like a computer screen where it's going to be mostly visible to just one person. Everybody in the room is looking at the exact same thing, and so we can ensure that we're all on the same page.
And then just to walk you quickly through what we have up here, that initial screen is where you pick yourself, which leads you to a tab screen that shows your games and the leaderboard. And then you can just add your game by picking an opponent, choosing the date, entering your score, and saving it. So that's kind of our basic experience that we mapped out here. So usually if there's one designer or multiple designers, we'll photograph the whiteboard and take that back, and then move into kind of trying to formalize it and validate it through wireframes. So this next part, we use Sketch for everything. We moved over to that a couple of years ago, and it just makes it really easy for us to collaborate with the developers. We like to try to use stock iOS elements just to get the wires out quickly, so that you're not spending a lot of time focusing still more on the UI. And then building a prototype in InVision is kind of the last step for the wireframes. So we'll export all the screens out of Sketch and then create a quick click-through prototype. So this initial screen is that screen where you're choosing yourself, just a really simple list view. You go into the Your Games and the leaderboard. You can go to this. Adding a game, you choose your opponent, enter in the score, and choose who won. So one of the main changes, as we're going through each kind of stage in the process, we will continually refine the UX. So one of the things that we changed from whiteboarding to wireframing was separating out the score and the winner, so that way the user wouldn't have to enter the score in a particular order or try to remember if they had to enter their score first or the other person's score first. It just separates them. Once everybody is kind of on the same page, again, we work with the developers to validate that we haven't introduced anything in the wireframing process that's going to complicate development. So then we start moving into the UI as a way to bring more personality to the app, and using colors and fonts and everything to bring hierarchy and help call out the primary actions. And then this is when we'll also start making control sheets for the developers. So going through each asset and doing all the different stages. So for example, this is showing a few of the buttons up here and showing the different states there. And then again, as a final, yes?
Can I ask you a question about something you just said?
Sure.
So you said you do a step there where you reconcile with developers to figure out what's difficult, what's not. What is your decision criteria for, okay, this is too difficult versus this is what the user needs, even if it is difficult, we need to deliver? Do you have some kind of tool you use to make that decision?
I think communication.
Yeah, honestly, we don't have a explicit criteria for these kind of things. Since every project just varies so wildly, not only with the requirements but with the deadline.
Client sensitivity to that too takes a big part in the decision-making process.
There's always going to be trade-offs and things like this, and so we.
Yep.
Specifically on mobile, when do you make the decision of having a UI for Android versus UI for iOS?
A lot of times in our projects, if we have clients that want both, typically the iOS comes out first, or we'll get, we'll start working on iOS typically first just because that's what gets released first, and then we take that and look at what can be translated to make it more Android friendly and make sure that it's platform specific. So we always create two totally separate apps when we are doing both platforms.
I think even if they have the same release date though, we'll start on one. Sorry, I work here too.
That's Raley here, our project manager. Project director, sorry.
We'll start on one platform over the other just to make sure we worked out the kinks so we're not changing two things and everything in two places. We'll sort of get it right on one and then easily convert over and accommodate for Android and all the styles and material design and everything separately. Plus, the Apple sort of review time and adds a little extra time on the development end of things, and we usually end up catching up and lining up at the end.
I have a question that might come between whiteboarding and UX. Before, where do you whenever you're working with a client, do you have tools or specific strategies that you use to gather requirements, whether it's technical constraints or business requirements, or just hey, you need these features. When it's been oh, this is too difficult, but we need this feature, otherwise this tool is not going to really. Do you all have certain strategies that you use to get everyone on the same page for that, aside from Excel?
Yeah, again, I think every client's a little bit different, but I think we do typically try to, we have sort of different deliverables, I guess, depending on different clients. So there's one thing that we don't have here that I guess is kind of an in-between stage of whiteboarding and UX, where we're more mapping out the specific actions or criteria And it's a little bit more, it's kind of a weird hybrid between the two because it's not showing any kind of UX elements. It's just telling you, here's what's on the screen and here are the priorities, like what's most important. So this is going through the flow as applied with the new visual styles that we've talked about. And one of the other nice things about InVision is that you can actually save these prototypes to your phone, so you can get a really realistic feel for what the app is going to look like. So we have choosing yourself, our games and the leaderboard, adding a game. That's it.
So, at about this time in the process, we're going to be starting the actual app development. Really just laying down the groundwork at this point. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take these tasks, these large, monolithic, difficult screens that Catherine has defined, and sort of break them up into easily digestible little pieces that we can more easily track with the assistance of the project manager. And for this, we use a tool called Asana around here. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, but this is what the Asana page typically looks like for me. So as you can see, it's just sort of like a list, and in each cell here we have different tasks. So for example, we have one task in progress right here about sorting the games in chronological order. And so as this gets done, we're going to move it from in progress to code review. Eventually, our friend Josh will look at the code, and pending his approval, we're going to move it up to design review eventually. And at that point, it's Catherine's job to double check this thing and make sure that everything's totally in its place, and then she'll check it off, and it'll go away, and then we'll have one down, just like 200 more to go. Not only that, but after that, we're going to be setting up our source control repositories. Now, for the technical side of our audience tonight, I'm sure this is going to come as a surprise to absolutely nobody. I don't know anybody who codes professionally without some kind of source control. But it's still an important step to take. You have to, pick your repo, decide if you're going to use Git or SVN, and make sure all the developers are pointed to the same code base. The next step that we do is going to be defining the data model. Obviously, that there's a lot of data to be passed around between your users and your games, and so when we define the data model, we are kind of coming up with a definition for how this stuff should be packaged when Vince sends it over to our end. And so for this, we use an awesome tool called Stoplight. Is Mark here tonight?
Yeah.
That's Mark? Oh, created by our own Mark. It's an awesome tool. I could go on about this thing for days. So for us, Stoplight serves two purposes. The first comes into play when we're defining these data models. And so it sort of acts as a collaborative platform for making these data models. So imagine like a Google Doc that everybody on the team can edit. But instead of writing paragraphs, you're going to be defining your schemas for your information. And so this is the API page in Stoplight. If you look over to your left here, you're going to see all the models that we have. So we have the user model selected right now. And then in the middle here, we have all the attributes of the user. We've got the name, a URL to their image, the ID that's not visible to the user, and counts of wins and losses. And so we can define the names for the fields and also what type they are. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to have, for example, the wins be a string or a series of letters, for example. We define that as a number instead. So yeah, that's part of the magic of Stoplight.
So we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but defining the overall data model in the contract also makes sure that when you have a front-end development half and a back-end development half working in parallel to meet the same goal, you don't have people backing up to a loading bay and then realizing that you're 2 feet off from where the edge of the truck is to where the dock is. So it makes sure that you're both building to the same standard at that point too, which is very important.
All right, so we kind of think of everything as layers. So we started off with that whiteboarding, we moved into wireframing, and then UX. And then while the developers are getting started on putting everything together, we try to look for the next layer, which is animation. And so we'll do these studies using Sketch, exporting our assets, and then animating things in After Effects. Again, just making the app more unique, adding more personality, and kind of helping communicate the UX better. And we usually work with the developers to prioritize which ones can go in. Sometimes something that was really easy to do in After Effects is not so easy to do in code. And then on that same line, doing the wireframes and the UI doesn't mean that that's exactly how it's going to come out in the end. And so you always have to, make concessions and be flexible on hitting deadlines. So this screen, for example, that one on the left was where you would choose your opponent. And so that was a unique view, and looking at our timeline so that we would have something ready for this evening. We looked for ways where we could still get the same UX across, but using the view that we already had for choose yourself. So it doesn't affect anything on the UX side, but it ends up saving a lot of time on the developer side.
And these kinds of back and forth concessions are all too common. They're gonna, more than likely, they're gonna happen on your project. Whether it be for time constraints, or sometimes we get stuff coming down the pipe that's actually not possible on a given platform. And it's no fault of the designer or the developer, but what's important is to establish this really clean, open channel of communication so that when these hiccups do occur, you can go right back and make the changes as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, this actually points to what you were talking about earlier about, how do you say like what's more important, the design or the development? And sometimes what can be pretty inexpensive for the developer can be a huge payoff for the designer, and it can go the other way around. Like Catherine can make one small concession, and we get a lot of payoff in other ways, and likewise for Max. So
it's something you learn with experience. What's gonna take the longest, what's gonna bust you.
Okay. So now let's talk about creating the API bit here. So as we talked about already with Stoplight, it's very important to make sure that you define your data model and have a good data contract right up front. So anyone who's calling the API and the service that is producing the API and the data that comes out of it are in lockstep, so you know exactly what you're expecting to have at the end of the day. Stoplight is a great tool for this. Swagger is an underlying standard that we use for that as well, underneath the covers. I don't know if anyone else has ever used other tools that fit into that space as well. There's a few other tools out there. Ramel's another one, for example. These are what we found work very, very well for us, though, too. So, another advantage of making sure that this is defined up front is that it covers all of the use cases, and you know exactly at the end of the day that what you've set out to achieve is going to be accessible based on the data that you're providing to the application too. In addition to just making sure that it's functionally efficient, it needs to be performant, it needs to properly deal with things like state management, and it needs to do it in a way that's secure. You don't want anyone to just be able to go in and access data that is for another customer, let's say, for example, and you can't do it with a 10-second response time. So all of these are important steps to keep in mind as you're developing your API. So next, let's talk about hooking up the API. So everything that we've talked about so far has been happening in parallel between some of the UX and UI elements, the animation later on, the front-end development, and the back-end and API services development. When everything starts to come together and you hook it up, using a tool like Stoplight is particularly helpful because you can proxy everything through Stoplight, and when things come online one by one, you can have them pass through to the real service. That's particularly good when you work in a test-driven development methodology because you can move from red to green. So what that means is you can have a very quick iteration break-fix cycle. Let's say, okay, we've got the user's endpoint up and running, but we still can't create a new game. So you can check that that's working, and if we discover that there's a bug, then we can quickly iterate on that and switch back to a stub in the meantime if that's causing some other issue, so that we're non-blocking to other teams that are working with us.
So as the project matures, there's a chance that your data models might have to change down the line. Say, for example, that Vince here wanted to change the way that dates are formatted on the game timestamp. So if they were any other company but Dev9, they might go in and just change it on their end and not tell us. And so we would be parsing this date with our old schema. And so from his end, it would look like everything was working. But on my end, it might screw up the JSON parser, for instance, and it would manifest itself as a bug on my end, when really everything's working fine. We're just sort of having a mismatch of communication here. So when you do need to change the data model, it's important that you make sure all the parties involved know up front. So you tackle this in a proactive rather than a reactive nature.
So we believe that we're at the point now where everything's functionally complete. And we want to go through and do an entire QA testing and final polish review of everything that we have going on. So this goes back to what we were just talking about with test-driven development, making sure that all of our tests pass for unit tests, integration tests, performance tests all across the board, and that it meets the acceptance criteria we have from all of the different stakeholders that are involved in the process. That's everyone that's a part of the app creation, and it's also your clients who are involved too. So product development, UX, UI, and your customers, whoever it is that's actually consuming the application.
And at 1323, we're, I think, around 17 people right now. So some agencies will have separate QA departments, but here we rely on our developers and designers to do that. So the development does a really thorough QA process, and when they're feeling good about it, they will load the build onto a phone and hand it off to the designers, and we will start going through it. And if we want to take a look at Asana again, can talk a little bit more about how we like to use that here. So you can see everything has a couple of different tags on it. So when the designers go through and add things, we'll put them in the backlog, and we try to mark them in the best way that explains it. So if we have cosmetic issues, if we have UX issues, sometimes we'll find bugs. And so that kind of just helps keep track of what kind of things need to be prioritized. Bugs are always first. And then we work with the developers after that and the PM to kind of determine what's next. So the developers will then look through our tasks, and they will assign each thing a tag of small, medium, or large, depending on how big the task is. And as Tom alluded to earlier, something that is maybe a cosmetic issue and it's a large, then we can see that if the designer feels comfortable with letting that one go, then maybe they'll get 8 other UX fixes or things like that instead. And so it's just that balance between what's most important, because you're not going to get everything. So this really helps us prioritize.
One of my favorite things to do at T23 is have what we call testing parties. Now, this may sound fancy, but really what it is everybody even remotely involved with the project is all just going to sit down in a big meeting room together with a wide array of different devices and just bang the hell out of this thing. And just try to find bugs, Also, if you don't have a closet full of old devices like we do, there's a really cool tool called Sauce Labs out there that will let you automate some of this stuff.
Yeah, Sauce Labs is an excellent tool to make sure that you can, let's say that there's a device that you don't particularly have on hand. Sauce Labs allows you to use a Selenium WebDriver to go out and actually connect and test out any device that they have in their inventory, which is very, very big. They've got a lot of different choices. So let's say that you find a bug, then you can very easily create a pull request, have someone go through a code review process, push out a new version on your CI/CD pipeline, and then continue this process in your overall final testing stage to make sure that everything's good to go before you send it out the door.
Yeah, and so these testing parties have a number of reasons why I love them so much. The first one, though, is that you get sort of a wide range of devices. You get a really strong bandwidth of different things that you're testing on. So if you have an obscure bug on like an iPhone 4S or something, this isn't going to be the kind of thing that slips through the cracks anymore. If everybody's on a different device, and assuming we have enough devices, we're going to catch this thing right then and there, and it's not going to go to the end user. Not only that, but when issues inevitably are found, they're brought to our immediate attention as developers. So I can say that there is nothing more frustrating than seeing like a 3-week-old ticket in Asana for a bug that I have no way of reproducing. You know, I'm not sure if it's there. I'm not sure if it's been fixed or not. These tickets can have a lot of mystery surrounding them when you're trying to recreate these things. And so if we're all in the same room together during one of these testing parties, if Catherine finds something, she can walk across the room and bring it to me instantly, and I'll have it right then and there. There's no question at all. So now for the moment you've all been waiting for, we're going to take a look at Raley Tally. So what you see right here is the home screen. This is the working Raley Tally. This is not... What's up? Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the working Raley Tally. So on this screen, we're going to choose the current user, and I'm going to be Becky today. Feeling like a Becky. So on this next screen, we're going to go ahead and load our games and leaderboard. So as you can see, we have Becky's past games in the center here. Ones where Becky is 1, she is big and full color. And the losing games, she's smaller and only at 60% opacity. We can also pop over to the leaderboard and see who's ranking at the top in our workplace. I see Sammy is sitting pretty with 1 win and no losses. So we're going to go ahead and add a game and challenge him and see if we can knock him off the top spot. So we're going to say that Sammy and I played a game on, we'll do July 9th of this year. We're just now getting it in the books. And I went ahead and won 21-8. So we're going to select Becky as the winner. Go ahead and save it. And then you'll see that the leaderboards have updated. Sammy is in 4th place now. And you'll also see it you'll also see it updated in Becky's past list of games as well. Or should I say my list of past games. I'm Becky. So yeah, if anybody wants to challenge my ping pong reign, we've got a table right over there, and I invite you all to bring it on.